Okay, so I'm just going to show some things from just a smattering of things that, like, this is 2007 from a show I had in California. This is a couple of years later from a show in New York. Yep, there it is. 2010. Like approximately 2013. About the same time. Show in New York, Sycamore Jenkins. Okay. I had an ICA 20-year survey, and this is one of the rooms for that survey.
That's so wild.
What?
It's just like 20 years of work all together. Like, how does that feel?
Totally traumatic. Yeah. Totally traumatic. I was scared to see most of it. Yeah. Okay. So that's another view. Like this. Around the same time, 2010. 2013, which I guess is now like 10 years ago. Just it doesn't seem like it, but it is.
That's wild. That is crazy. It's like gravity defying. When was this one made?
Yeah, this was 2012. There you can see it in the background. This is what I had a show that I called Turn Up the Bass. And at Sigma Jenkins, and so this is at the entry because I was so worn out by people talking the basses.
By people say that again?
By people talking about the pedestals or bases of for my work. So I just played with that and made it about music. Turn up the bass.
Yeah, play on words.
I exploded the idea of what's on top and what's on the bottom, and that none of it matters. You know, that idea of something, the important part is on top and the somewhat important part is then underneath, but not as important, you know, the artwork, how one presents the artwork. So I tried to make it, that's what got me making sort of larger work that incorporated the wood and the steel, and like
So
just do.
making both of them just as important. Like, I mean, because like the base and the is a part of the sculpture as well. You know, it's just like even if it's like just on a pedestal, I feel like when you're dealing with sculpture, the pedestal then becomes a part of the sculpture as well. So it's just like this thing that influences the way that like we enter the work. And I think that's like the most exciting thing, or like one of the most exciting things about your work, and why like I'm such like a huge fan, is just like um I don't know, it's just like really throws into question just like the way that the objects are like perceived. But like I just love the vocabulary of like the quote unquote bases, but to me it's just like all one sculpture. And
Yeah.
the fact that it doesn't follow like traditional kind of like formulas of what sculpture is supposed to sit on, I think like the ways that you like just like deal with that have definitely like been super like influential onto me and my art practice, and like kind of developing a studio ethos of you know, not showing stuff on on white pedestals.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, but I mean, that's exactly it. I actually, when I first showed ceramics and I just made all these, I just couldn't even imagine that I would have a show where I would have white pedestals. But that's because I'd always worked in a lot of different materials. Like I didn't think of one material being more primary than the next. And so, but the conversation, people were constantly saying, Brancusi, that's who, that's what it's about. And of course, I love Brancusi, that's great. But you know what? It wasn't actually about Brancusi any more than it was like, hey, you want to see this thing I'm making? I'm going to tell you how high it should be, like how you're going to look at it. Because where it is in relationship to your body is important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came to think, and also the form, I felt like the bases had a lot to do with just being the architecture for the sculpture, like maybe less expressive, but a companion piece.
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely, inseparable. And I like, I think that second one where I would paint it, like the color would offset it as well, and so, but this I started just to, sort of go crazy and just say, okay, let's just have a different conversation. But I don't know if it doesn't really matter. It's just, I needed to have a different conversation in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And what's a pedestal? Uh, and I think there's one more in this. Is there one more or two more? Oh yeah. Yeah. Uh,
So that little leg, that little foot on the sculpture is so cute. The fact that this tiny thing is like supporting like this massive weight of what you can imagine, like the form is almost like a little mind bending, like you want to put something a little bit chunkier to match that, but there's like that's such like a nice like contrasting element. Yeah,
yeah.
these are very like, all, yeah, your work is just like so, um I think like a word that comes to mind is like freeing, because like it's like, I feel like form and kind of like the communication with the materials, that seems like, at least to me from the outside looking in, that seems to be the thing that's driving the studio and driving your question. And it's just like letting the materials be the materials, and kind of like that open communication, that seems like that is such like an open spot to be in, but also like could be like super scary too, because it's like you're driving in the dark without your high beams on, and you're not too sure what's gonna like come across, and you're just like figuring it out.
No, not sure at all.
Oh wow.
So not sure at all. I have no idea, mostly what I'm doing. I mean, I think, and I think you're doing the same thing, is we're, as artists, the privilege actually and the burden is to be a sponge.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot actually how funny that front leg looked until you said it. But the real thing that was happening then was that I was working at the Frick. I mean, the Frick had asked me to do a installation of 18th century, of their collection of 18th century porcelain. So I was around all this crazy 18th century furniture. And one of the things, and I was like, wow, I never really looked at that. Look at these animal feet. Look at how, like, it's incredibly strange uh, that the whole Baroque aesthetic. And so it just found myself doing that, and I was joking around, and I put it on there and I was like, yeah, it's really kind of dumb, and that's what I like about it. And that being in the place, being not afraid to be a little bit dumb, I think that's what you're playing with too, you know, because what does it mean to use humor and take control of it, and also not take control of it? You know, what is all that stuff? I had a bunch of questions I was thinking about asking you, but anyway, this piece is called "The Body is an Ear." So I think that might be the end of my presentation. And here you are, Woody.
Yeah, this show is still up.
Yeah.
Still up. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm still kind of like just processing the entire the entire thing. I feel like you know, to go back to what you just said, like a moment with like finding that foot and just like doing the thing, and you know, there being a little bit of like humor, but there's also like this like visual tension too, because it throws the thing, it throws it offset. I think like, you know, at least for me, the studio is like a point of like discovery. It's a point of departure. It's like its own kind of like entity and like space in and of itself. So yeah, I feel like, I don't know, I think like the thing that I'm starting to hone in on a lot more is letting my intuition be the driving force of like the work, and kind of going to the work and like being open to like whatever it kind of calls for me to do, or whatever type of like skills or like thing I need to investigate. Is just like, I'm not trying to dictate the work so much, but I'm like letting it kind of like tell me what needs to happen. And this show, I feel like I made this show in like a blink of an eye. It's just like you just got into, I feel like I just got into like a studio rhythm and just started building that consistency and like working on a couple of pieces, and things just started to bounce around and communicate with each other. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I have so many things to say, because I just want to say, first off, that this view is showing maybe my favorite thing about the show, which is that doorway.
Yeah.
Because I think like taking the gallery doorway, that big, you know, classic white cube opening, and making it narrow and putting a real door on it, and then laying down a real not real floor, like that is an intervention that blew I thought that was genius. That blew my mind, because that there's so much about passage, and also sculpture and movement in a doorway. So like immediately the strangeness of passing through that door, that was both right and wrong at the same time, was a great introduction to the show. And I feel like after that, you know, you're in, you know, what you've gone through, it's almost like an Alice in Wonderland thing. Okay, new system of beliefs now. And so you can tell us anything and we believe you. And you did, you told us anything. And you had fun, and I could feel the energy around that and the intelligence of that move and the thoroughness of that conception. So anyway, that's really good. I was gonna ask you related to, because you're actually, we're in different points in our careers, and you were in school not that long ago.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that idea that you just brought up of free will and intuition and agency, artistic agency that we all want in order to make the magic happen. So I was thinking, like, I was remembering when I would go to schools and give crits, there was so much emphasis on artist statements.
Mm. I mean,
And
such a drag.
such a drag. And so, and why is it a drag? That's because, and so to the extent that people would give me send me, here are the students you're gonna visit with, here are their statements. I was like, burn those. That is, you're teaching people to make things to fit some idea rather than to have the idea drive the work and be very open and be a mess, to contradiction. You don't want the thing being of a piece. You don't want it to be so understandable. John Ashbery said, the worse your work is, the easier it is to talk about. You don't want that.
But it's
You
like
want,
movies, it's like books, it's like movie endings that like leave you a little bit more confused, or it's just like I like things that kind of like leave me with more questions, because that's when the conversation actually happens, and then it meanders and it becomes
yeah.
open and it goes like somewhere else. I think one of the things that I'm most grateful for being out of school is not having to write an artist statement. And just kind of letting the work dictate, like just dictate, yourself and dictate your life. I feel like when you go into the studio and you have this such specific thing that you're trying to like get at, I feel like the whole magic and mystery of what the studio is, it kind of dies there. And I think that is like funneled into the work, that energy becomes like contrived and you're afraid to like do certain things because it doesn't fit this box that you have is in terms of what you're trying to communicate and what you're trying to say. I feel like yeah, there's like there kind of like needs to be like this like openness, and I feel like that's something that I've looking at your work and looking at your practice, and kind of like there's so much like openness for like, I guess, the viewer and the audience to come into the work and like make of it what they want to make. But I feel like your sculptures are just like they just call so much attention to like your body in relationship to another object. Like you have to contort and bend around and like move around to really try and like understand what's going on. But then there's like so much range and so much contradiction that exists in like a piece, with the texture and some things being matte, some things being shiny, the different materials kind of like merging together, or having like something at the top of the sculpture that's like completely like opaque and dense and like has this like kind of compression, and then it has like these dainty steel like legs that are holding it up. I think that contradiction and that like clashing, it's just like it's like you're almost like doing something and doing the exact opposite in a piece. And there's so much of that, and I think it makes for a rich experience as a viewer and somebody who's a fan of just like sculpture and the way things work in space and an environment, and the way things work in relation to like one's own body. I think that is just like that openness is kind of key.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm going to just write all that down, Woody. But that, did a good job. I really appreciate it, but I'm going to just tell you something, that you're my audience. Do you know what I mean? Like that, what you just said, that's because you get it. I feel like the art world has become like the artist statements that we were just decrying. Like, oh, this person does that, but and then they want to package you.
Mm-hmm.
They want to package me, and the privilege that you have earned is to push back on the packaging, but it's not as easy as people think, and like the press release is another version of the artist statement, and that from school. It's like narrowing things rather than making things broad. And I feel like it's only like when I say I want to make something more than an idea, that's because I just want to make something that you can't describe easily. And that's what you were just saying, but that's a much harder sell, literally and figuratively. You know what I mean? So, I mean, like that's, I think also in our age, I know everybody loves talking about the digital age and how our attention span is so short. So look at something and get it right away. And that's why painting is the medium of the moment and will always be the medium of the moment, because sculpture involves time and complexity, and painting, I love painting, but you can definitely, it's a contain, it's much more contained situation, and people want that containment. So, it's just,
I
it's
think
just
I
really
think
complicated.
people are like more used to like looking at images. I feel like we just have more kind of like
Yeah.
experience looking at things that are a little bit flattened, and it's just like you can't really look at, or like, I mean, we're looking at this presentation of like my work, and it's like on a 2D surface, but it's just like there's something that is like remarkable that happens when you're in space with an object that involves like all of your senses. So I feel like, I don't know. I feel like sculpture is gonna like. I feel like sculpture is kind of like here to stay, no matter. Like it's always gonna be a thing, and I feel like it's just not even trying to compare the two. Like painting is just like painting, and sculpture is just like something else entirely different. And it's
Yeah.
just like, you know, yeah, yeah.
Well,
But
yeah, go ahead.
no, just like too with like things kind of being put in like boxes and like this like idea of like making things that are like easily like digestible, or like falling into these like narratives, and like these like kind of like whatever the packaging that happens. I feel like that's something that like more recently I've been like starting to like see. And I think like I guess like I'm like asking you, like, how do you fight that impulse, and like how do you kind of like make the studio space that feels like that is actually like this space that's like free and expansive, and you're not there to kind of like fit into these boxes, but you're there to like see what kind of unfolds. Like yeah, I'm realizing that is a challenge. That is a huge challenge. And I guess I'm just asking, like, yeah, like how do you maneuver that, and like what's kind of like your internal logic, and what you have to tell yourself in the mirror to kind of like do what it is that you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, well, Well, first of all, I should say that being a woman artist, uh, one is, it's easy. The demand on me wasn't as much. I think that the demand on you right now or in this historical moment is much more than what existed for me. And I think, and so the protection, the barriers that you have to construct are real, and because you have nothing to worry about. Like, that's the thing you have to get up and tell yourself every day.
Mhm.
You have nothing to worry about. You've already done a great body of work. Now or what, I hate that term too, by the way.
Bodies of work. It's all just like kind of builds on top of itself. Yeah, it's just like you don't just like make one thing and then move to another thing. It's just like it's all in there mushed together.
Yeah, yeah. I think that um like in 2012, I was on the cover of Art in America with ceramics. And I remember my dealer, I think it was Jack Shaman at the time, saying, "Oh, this is going to be just massive." It got me a lot of artists paying attention. But I don't know, I didn't have, my career has never been explosive. But building the slow and steady has always been my goal.
Mm-hmm.
And and part of that, sorry, I have a cold. Part of that is I had kids, I had a teaching job, so I created a lot of space by not being able to run all over the world and be everywhere or produce that much. So, but also, women are still hugely the underdog,
Yeah.
hugely, hugely. And the art world, that's the other thing. It's just gonna, you can transcend whatever information and labels get thrown your way. You have talent, you're gonna prevail. But I would say slow and steady does have its benefit, because you can never be a star your whole career. It just doesn't happen. You can be a solid participant, you can have a solid career, but you don't need to be a star the whole time.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like one of those things, like even like just talk like star, like the only thing like me personally that I want to do is like just make the work. Like I enjoy making artwork. I love being in the studio. And it's just like, one of the kind of like things that I'm like starting to stamp out is like a huge like studio ethos is just like if I go in here and I feel like I can't be free, then there's no point in being in here, because if I can't be free in art, I'm not free anywhere else. So it's
Right.
just like, it's just going in and making the things that I want to make and not the things that I think needs to be made. I feel like I hope that that's something that does come across like in my work and in the range of things that are like I'm able to like dip and dabble into. And I'm like always trying to increase that like that whatever that visual vocabulary, or increase like what I think I am capable of in the studio. And it's just like one of those things where yeah, the whole art world and like things at large, and like yeah, like it's slow and steady and consistent. Like I'm a huge fan of that. Like just being consistent and just being kind of like just like doing the things that no matter regardless of what's going on, you're still going to be doing those things because like that's just the foundation. And I feel like I have this I have different like practices, but like just like running and like doing like kind of like having like a physical kind of like regimen. It's just like there's days where I don't want to run, but I still get up and run, and it's just like I feel like that kind of training is like translating into the studio because it's just like, regardless of whether you have shows or not, like there's just like baseline that's always going to be there.
Yes. And what you just said, regardless of whether you have shows, I never work for a show. That's the other thing that I forgot to mention, and that's you segued into. So I'm always just work, and I always have just worked.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I have a show, I just see what's around and try to edit things into place. I mean, if I'm not like, there was this, the only time I stopped working was at the beginning of the pandemic, because I
Yeah.
had just had a show that opened that I'd worked on. I put a lot into it. It was my first show at Pace. It was 2020, end of February it opened. And 10 days later, it was supposed to be open for 2 months. I had a million museum visits. 10 days later, it closed. Nothing happened. I mean, it was like, it wasn't a failure, but it was like it was not what it was going to be. And it wasn't just about that, but I also thought, oh, me, my family, we're all going to die because we don't know what this
Yeah,
is.
that's real. That's very real.
Yeah. So I just was sitting, like not able to go to the studio for the first time in my life, really. And I could see how I could maybe fold the whole thing down.
Whoa.
But everybody around me was so disturbed. My family, who was always like, why do you always have to go to the studio, is all saying, you need to go to the studio. Uh, everybody's, and my assistant was like, you need to go to the studio. And so I forced myself to do that. And I realized like that was so quiet. There was such power in that quiet that you could almost forget about everything else, and that it is
Yeah.
almost a bodily need when you're an artist. And I think,
That's the
and
reason why I go to the studio. That is like the reason why I go to the studio because nothing else matter. Like my body don't matter.
yeah,
Nothing matter. I just you just go in there and things are just are and it's peaceful. It's like it's like going to church or going like to it's whatever like transcendental experience that's like that is the reason to go into the studio because it is like and that's like the biggest blessing I feel like for creative people or like just people who have like some type of passion is just like whatever is going on in the outside world you have a place where or
exactly.
something that is just for you and it seems like that's a hard thing to come by.
I know. I mean, and the good fortune that we have that, is something to be celebrated.
Yeah.
And the celebration of that is honoring it, and honoring it in the way that you were talking about, which is, this is crazy that I get to do whatever I want to do. So that is there is a lot about being an artist that is not privileged. I mean, like, artists in this country in general are sort of like 2 steps above criminal. I mean, as in terms of if in the larger culture, not in our little world where everybody loves art.
it's just like also precarious too, because you never know what the future holds. So it's just like you're always, you just don't know.
To not worry, you know, uh is is good, because you're in such a secure position. Like, I had a teaching job for 15 years to keep myself above water. And I actually loved my student. I found that teaching was one of the true gifts, that I found myself saying things I didn't even know I thought. And then I realized, oh yeah, this is important, because I just had to say things. I was, you know, standing in front of the room, and it let me know what I was thinking. So you could do, you don't have to worry about the ups and downs of anything. I mean, and you're at such a great point. I mean, karma is an amazing vehicle for you. Jessica Silverman, amazing. You just have to get them off your back. That's going to be good. Sorry, Brendan. They're gonna, you know, they're gonna, and then there's gonna be so many things that get thrown your way, and many more things that got thrown my way at that age. And I think, you know, you can feel like those things will come around, because mostly when I've turned something down, it does come around. It doesn't make it like it's never going to happen. Something better, or that thing shows up again, or a different version of that thing shows up again when it's a better time.
Yeah, yeah.
So you know, I don't really know, but I think privacy. It's funny we're talking about privacy. Even to mention the term privacy on a webinar is like a joke.
Yeah, because it's contradicting in itself, but what is life without those contradictions, right?
I know, exactly. You know, so you know, having some privacy, and developing uh developing your vocabulary outside of a show,
Yeah, yeah.
just keeping things in the studio. Like,
Just to have in the studio.
yeah. One of the reasons I moved out of New York City for my studios, one was because, you know, it was ridiculously expensive and putting too many burdens on me. But also, so that whole thing of studio visits, I was like, I need to get out of that. So now I like people know I can't go to openings. Nope, I'm not going to the opening. And I'm also not gonna have studio visits, except very few of them, because that's
Mhm.
the other time suck. Because time is just so precious.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so and you know, so when you don't have a lot of studio visits, when you don't let people into your studio, you are creating privacy uh, for yourself that is so, you know, you just gives you permission to fail.
Yeah.
I throw out at least 30% of what I make. I mean, it's just like I have this pit outside my studio that we call the archaeological dig. It's like the future archaeological dig. We just like throw things in there, you know. I've been throwing things in there for 12 years.
Wow.
So God only knows what's in there, but it's, I feel like throwing things out is such a purge, because what needs to, and so healthy, because what needs to happen is still going to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, look at this picture we're looking at. You got this. I mean, this is my relationship to it, but this kind of almost Buddhist iconography
Mm-hmm.
there. Tell me about that.
It's actually all coming from like looking at a lot of pre-colonial African objects and looking at the forms and like understanding like why things are kneeling, why things are holding bowls, and also looking at I was in New York in March, and there was a show up at the Met that contextualized African art with Egyptian art, and you see a
Oh,
lot of the Egyptian art
yeah,
doing the same things that and I thought that was just so incredible.
me too.
So I've just been looking at a lot of those type of like references and imagery, and like they're all kind of like very open culturally, because like they do reference like Buddhist like poses and stances, but yeah, this I think that part of it is just like trying to understand
Yeah,
uh kind of like this like this and like this ancestral note, like outside of like colonization, so looking at a lot of like pre-colonial objects, or like newfound, or like at least for me, newfound African religion, things that I've never heard about, and
mm,
that language is kind of like really making its way into the sculptures. But I'm hoping that they are like open enough where it still relates to people like across different like backgrounds and specks of life and whatnot. But like to me personally, that's just what's going into the work. But
interesting.
even that kind of like situation is like its own separate like personal like venture, and like this like idea of like privacy too. I feel like my intuition is like kind of like telling me that I live in Oakland, so I'm kind of like, Oakland has a rich community, but it's not LA, it's not New York. So I feel like here I could just like really get into a good studio routine, and I'm not like inundated with like going into openings and like seeing shows. I see things that when I want to see them, and the studio visit thing is just like, I feel like because I'm in Oakland, I'm not as accessible. So if somebody wants to come here, it's like, somebody's coming here for a very specific like intention, and not just to like fill in
Mm,
a Tuesday afternoon. Let me get out of the office and
yeah, exactly.
just go by and like spend time. But the time thing is just like, that is something like, I don't know. I think about all the like, I just think about a lot, it's just like the thing with time is like, we don't know how much of it we have left. So part of me is just like, it's almost like frantic energy of just like, I need to do, or I need to make the thing that I want to make right now, because like I just don't know. So let me get it out of my system as soon as possible so I can just see it. So I feel like there is like this kind of like relationship, at least that I have with just the studio, and like understanding like how sacred it is to have that time just to kind of like be in that creative process. I feel like that is just like, it's just like insane. It's like out of this world. It's like almost paranormal just to have this thing that or like these like whatever you want to call it, emotions, feelings, images, something that needs this going on internally that needs to get transmuted into a physical actualized thing. I'm like, that is like magic right there. That's alchemy. That's like, that is
Mm,
creation. That is like the divine spirit. Like that is what creation is, right? So it's just like, I understand how important that is and how special that is. And it's just like, yo, I'm gonna try like, I'm gonna try and put my elbows up to like make sure that I have that relationship to the making. And it's just like, it's like I don't want to be making work like stressed out or like worried about a deadline. I feel like my approach to like deadlines now is just like, yeah, it's like if I make it, I make it. If nothing
so good.
don't come out, like I'm sorry, like it's not like I'm not making things, but it's just like sometimes things don't happen, and that's what the studio is.
Exactly. Just say no. I mean, you're going to be, it's not going to, you're going to be, you know, it's not going to, 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 you know, it's not going to let up. You're going to have to make that time, and everybody's going to understand. People won't say that. They'll understand, they'll respect you, but they're never going to say that.
Yeah.
This is such a weird shot. I hate those big wide angles because it's like miniaturizing things. I think the
Yeah,
nice thing
it kind of
about
distorts the shape of it a little bit too. I think that's the cue to go on to the next slide.
yeah, because the really important thing about your work is the intimacy.
Yeah.
So the last thing that you want, I mean, you have to have installation views, but I'm not a fan of, I also try to control my images because that is sort of, or the photography, because that's everybody people, basic photography, they come in, they wanted to get the whole view, but I never let them. Like this is so funny. And the
Yeah.
color, like purple, is such an abrasive color.
I love abrasive colors. I mean,
I noticed that in your palette, and I I thought it's not like you're taking purple and you're making it funny. Uh, so that colors have personalities.
mm-hmm.
Like color to me is a whole language. That's just like such a gift to use color. A lot of sculptors do not use color. I feel like people who play in ceramics, a lot of people came from the painting world, so they love the melted color. But historically, that's really not been a sculpture.
Yeah, there's been like brown pots or like just like, yeah, just like the atmospheric stuff and things that are a little bit more muted. But I I think I don't know, I just like see things like or I'm just like attracted to colors that are like, it's no mistaking what that is. It's not in this like in between space. Like if I'm gonna choose a yellow, it's gonna be like the brightest yellow, or it's gonna be a very kind of like just like pure yellow. Yeah, but colors do kind of like really speak to different psychological and emotional states. And I feel like, it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's almost I don't want to say second nature, but because there is a lot of thought that comes with like deciding what the color of something is going to be. I feel like I'm constantly making like textiles in the studio and swatches and trying to understand how the glaze like works with each other and whatnot. But yeah, I feel like it's tricky to kind of like combine color with form, with texture, with all and your sculptures do all of that. It's just there's so many things to look at on just like a formal level. It's just like it's like mind blowing and like it's like a mystery. Is like to some of the surfaces and textures and the fact that like you have these things kind of like sitting next to each other that are like opposing forces, but are sitting like harmoniously together within one piece. I think that like I don't know. I think that contradiction that seems to be a lot of substance there when thinking about your work and just like being in the same space as your work. Yeah, it's just a lot of things that kind of like bounce back and forth that just like open you. At least they open me up to kind of like have this other kind of like relationship to what I'm looking to, and it's just like a space that is very like almost like ungrounded because everything is like in in combination or in like they're like just like mixing together in this when you're trying to like pull the different nuances and textures out. It's just like so much to take in. It's a lot of information, a lot of information.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And it is, you know, it is like the basic ideas of my work are about like this kind of fragility of life or all things, and what it's like to be alive and in a body kind of thing. But at the same time, I feel the other true thing that it's about is what you're saying, which is that you can stand next to the thing and appreciate that I had joy, that I'm communicating some kind of joy,
Yeah.
some kind of excitement, some kind of joy, and that I'm sharing it. So I just like that without there being, you don't have to know anything.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's where what art can do. It can communicate that without it being a paragraph, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
It can communicate, yes, this is a generous act. This is you know, there's an act of generosity here that I had fun putting together, you know, and I want you to share it with me. Or maybe I just want you to share it with me, and that's the act of generosity. But
Yeah.
whatever it is, I'm just doing the best I can, and I'm not laying back and strategizing. Like, here's what I should do to, because in 2 shows from now, I'm gonna break it open and do this. And I know that this is like so many, like, it used to just blow my mind, you know, especially like in the early 90s, late 80s. Like, I just remember being in New York and just being so confused. Like, people were having these shows that really, or I don't know, there's certain, having these shows that felt so strategic. Like, we should not have shows that feel strategic.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
curators should not make shows in museums that feel strategic. They should be like,
have some
I want
soul. Some
curators to have that same point of view. I want curatorial efforts to be generous and unpredictable, and the level of predictability that has come over the art world is like puts one to sleep. I mean, obviously there are great exceptions, but you know, we need art historians, we need curators to tell us what the fuck we're doing, you know, to put the
yeah,
word
that's
things.
real.
Like, don't, you know, don't dumb down these shows, or don't, you know, make something exciting happen. uh,
Yeah.
that's, you know, that's the real thing.
The
um
joy too, and then kind of like energy that goes into like making something, like something that, I mean, I feel like there's space for everything to exist in the world, but for me, when I'm looking at art, like, you know, there's some stuff that feels a little bit too, like, too heady or too cerebral, and it like keeps me at a distance. But then you have other things that just like, it just like looks like there's like a spirit and a soul, and like
mhm.
human error like in the work. I feel like those things like at least to me and like my specific palette, like make something that is more kind of like just like compelling in a way, but like also like, you know, where is sincerity, where is just like, you know, just like speaking like your truth and not like really worrying about how the outside constructs that voice and like what you're trying to communicate. You know, it
Mhm.
feels like sometimes like, and I don't have like the specific language like to really like talk about it, but it's just like there's just like something that I could like hold in my body where it feels like there's some things that just like are like made with kind of like these outside eyes, kind of like looking into the studio as well. And they're like things that are made that are just like, you have your blinders on and then you look up and you're just like, whoa, like what is that thing? Because that thing doesn't look like anything else going on, So I kind of like get what you're saying with and this is why I personally stay off of Instagram, because there's like, you see that predictable shit so much where it's just like, it's not you just put all the pieces together and it's just like, oh yeah, that's what you get. It's like a mood board, or like a like kind of like a genre playlist, and you just have these like things that hit all the things that that are great and amazing, and like aesthetically they work, but it's just like, well, I like a little bit of risk, of like a little bit of risk taking, or a little bit of just kind of like shooting your shot in the dark and seeing what happens. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Like it's just like, yeah, what is the thing that really feels like it is coming from like a specific, genuine, like sincere voice? What does that feel like? And this is also going into like the things I'm trying to like build into like my studio ethos, is just like, if I'm not gonna like be truthful or be sincere, like it's no point in me like even showing up to the studio to make a thing. Like I
Yeah.
my time is better spent at home walking my dog, or on a hike, or doing something else. It's just like, if yeah, I don't know, it's just like weird to me, like that there's stuff that I see, and that is just like, to what you're saying, it just feels weird to me. Like it almost doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute. I'm just like damn, like I came out here and it's just like I understand why this thing is being made, but like I don't want to understand all the time. Like this is not the news. This is not like I don't want to understand. Like I want to look at stuff that is just like, it almost like slaps you in the forehead, where you're just like, yo, what is this? Like, and even if it's weird, even if it like doesn't really completely land, like, if things kind of like leave more of a bitter taste in my mouth, those are the things that I'm like more compelled to kind of like let ruminate in my mind a little bit longer, and it's just like, I feel like I've had a lot, I've overcome a lot of insecurity in that, where it's just like, if I look at the stuff that I'm making in comparison to other stuff, I'm just like, yo, like what I'm doing over here is not even art. It's just, it makes me feel strange. It makes me feel weird, but it's just like, I kind of have to continue on that because it doesn't fit into like these other things. So,
Uh,
yeah.
So tell me more about the insecurity. So like at which point were you feeling insecure?
Yeah,
When, as an undergraduate or in graduate school, or?
actually, like after I graduated, it was like the huge yellow box fan that I made for Miami Art Basel in 2019, this sculpture right here. And I remember like you installing the fan, and I was excited about it. And then I walked around and I was like, holy shit, everything else is like art. And I'm like, I just made this big old yellow the school bus thing. I'm just like, oh my God, this is gonna go terribly wrong. Like, I was like freaking out. I was freaking out. Um, yeah, this, I was just like, I can't believe that the galleries even let me make this massive object. Like, I was just going through it. And this is another thing too, just like I feel like, just like this, another reason why I don't like spending time online is just like, you start seeing stuff and then you
Yeah.
start comparing yourself to other stuff that you're seeing. I'm like, that is not cool. That is not good, because I feel like then, if you're in that space for so long, you start to steer your car to fit into the things that already have this consensus and are already have all this traction, already doing all of the things. So it's just like, it takes work to keep veering the other way. And
Yeah. Well, the other reason not to go online or look at things too much is because you're going to see all the knockoffs, like hundreds of them. So, you know, and that's, so what, you know, so whatever. But I love what you said about you actually did make this huge thing that was very bold. And it was only when you went to install it, like you actually saw it, that you felt insecure. You didn't feel insecure while you were making it.
Because all of that stuff is happening in the vacuum of the studio, and like you do talking about privacy. When you have privacy, you just go through your own things outside of everything else, you know. And that's like if you could harbor that, that's a very special, powerful place to be making stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I'm sure that's where you can rely on your good galleries. They're not going to be paying up the money to make that thing in bronze. It's not a good thing. So, I mean, I'm not saying that that always happens, but I think you have two good galleries, and that's true. So I'm sure, you know, I'm sure they're asking you to do more things like that, but you'll push back. So, but I did want to say, in your show, you have these, what about the experience of bronze casting, like transmuting materials from the clay to this heavy, more classical material, and also shifting scale?
Yeah, I think like the main like impetus is like, you know, thinking about like scale, like, you know, unfortunately, like I have limitations with like the size of the kilns that I have, and there are like certain things that I want to make larger that don't make sense out of ceramic. So just
Yeah.
like out of like this formality is like, okay, like bronze is a material that holds on to like the textures, and like it holds on to a lot of the elements that, at least for me, make my work the way that it is, in terms of like things being like oblong and not directly straight. Like the bronze holds on to all of that. So yeah, it just kind of made sense in terms of just like playing around with thinking about how objects exist in the space together, and then like, you know, that kind of like dance with, you know, your body in relation to something else. So it's just like, I think for me, you know, thinking about how can I add as much like language in like an exhibition is like something that's like driving a lot of the decision. So there are things that are like small, there are things that are a little bit larger, there are things that are closed, there are things that are open, there are things that are dark, bright. So it's all these things kind of like bouncing around together in the room. And like, you know, that's kind of like how I'm like approaching my studio now, is just like having different things kind of going on like all over the place. So yeah, yeah.
I mean, like the shifting scale that you're talking about, I think that's something that you are doing. I think there's two things, or more, but two things that you're doing very, very naturally. And that is the shifting scale. And I don't think everybody does that naturally. You know, that compositionally, you have a lot that's just innate. They're not overworked. You've figured it out, you know, and then, and not everybody can do that. And the other thing is the color. So I think you hinted at that before, like it's in your body. I do think we're born like that. Like, I know with me, like color was always like a strong pull for me. And I could see when I had kids how one had that and one didn't, and like how, and with students of mine, how like for some people it was a stretch, they had to think through the color, and for others it's like this thing
Dive
wants
right in.
yellow, you know,
Yeah.
that thing wants to be like, you just, it just appears. And I think that I love that, and I feel like that's a real gift. And it's like you can just see here that you have this golden yellow fan, but then the citrus, the warmth of that is pushed back a little by the
Hmm.
citrus of the other yellow. I don't know whether those are wood or ceramic or whatever.
Those are ceramic, and yeah, I was talking to one of my friends. They're like telling me about like color, and it was like, how do I choose colors? I was like, I don't know anything about color theory. I don't know anything contrasting, complementary, analogy. I don't know none of that. It's just it is this thing that just kind of lives inside, and like I
Yeah,
think there are things like with thinking about like installation and exhibition and like just the decisions that I made, in the show. I feel like in this most recent Karma show, I feel like I was like making stuff, and I was just like randomly just like making things. And then,
yeah,
I set out aside time. Is like, oh, I need a couple of like punctuations for the wall. Like I need to have things on the wall. So then like, you have all these things on the floor. Then like, how does your eye completely move all around the space? So it's like these things that like I don't necessarily plan for, but it's just like having things on hand to like help make those decisions in terms of how things situate in space. And I think it's like all a dance of like how your eye and how your body moves around. So it's just like, yeah, you have something large here, but you want to have something a little bit, smaller in size, and you want to so it's just like all these things are like coming together, and it's just like I couldn't tell you how or like why. It's just is the way that it is. And I feel like I don't know, that kind of like first like impetus to do something, that first impulse, like that's something that I'm really learning to trust. And it's just like something that I'll probably like just like live and die by. It's just like sometimes I will make the first choice, and won't be the way that I want it to go, but guess what, like I didn't labor over it. And there's like so much information that happens when you just do the thing, and you don't like just like sit around trying to like wonder, it's like, is this even worth the effort? You thought about it. If you have time to do it, just see what the hell happens and go from there. And I think that is a lot how the things are like kind of like coming together. And I'm just like, just like excited to see what like the studio like continuing to work for like another decade or so, just like making stuff like what type of like weirdness and strangeness and like
yeah,
craziness happens from just like that kind of compounding thing of doing things, seeing how it works, doing things, seeing how it all kind of like adds up to build this foundation that could be something potentially like rich and amazing. But that doesn't happen if you do the same thing.
yeah. No, that's exactly that's exactly right. And it doesn't have like, that's why I think it's so much more fun to work and not think about it and worry, not overthink about it,
Hmm.
worry about it and be precious about it, but to throw it out. Like, yeah, it's just, clay is the ultimate recyclable material.
Yeah, yeah.
It's great, but I throw out a lot of other stuff too. And so I feel like the editing process can be our friend. And it sounds like that's something you're very attuned to already. So did the foundry paint this thing yellow?
Yeah,
Or
the foundry like powder coated it. So this is a powder coat. And then we were looking at like swatches, and I was like sending colors back and forth, and they're like sending me colors of what they could do, and I literally picked the most absurd, yeah, because it felt like that's what the sculpture needed. Like it just, it's like one of those things where it's just like it just makes sense. You're just like, oh, like this is the thing. And again, going back to what you said before, is like um I think one of the things that I'm becoming more grateful of, and like myself, is just like this kind of like trusting like my instincts and just like doing the thing and moving forward. And if it works, if it doesn't work, like you reassess it afterwards. But that kind of like first impulse and like kind of keeping it moving, like I feel like a lot of decisions I make in the studio kind of come out of that. And yeah, I mess up a whole lot of the time, but is all that information is there, and then you just readjust to the thing.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, making that golden fan, just putting that color on it takes it out of being the fan just as much as enlarging the scale.
Hmm.
So both of those make you believe something on a whole other level. Like it creates a whole other reality. So then suddenly you're looking at those house plants and you're like, wait, are those full-grown trees? Like nothing, all
Throws
scale
everything into question.
question. Yeah. And questioning everything, I think, is, what I mean, I'm not going to make you a Buddhist, but I'm saying all of those things working in the, with that idea of fragility and working in the present moment in that questioning way is very, has a lot to do with contemplative thought from Asia. But obviously, I know not enough about African. I did read that you were interested in the Yoruba.
Yeah, Yoruba kind of has this like undertone of like this idea of coolness, right? Like keeping your head cool under pressure, and like this idea of like contradictions being able to exist. Like, I feel like I grew up Catholic, and like, the serpent was always something as this evil omen. And you see a snake or a serpent, it's like, sign of like the devil on earth. But in Yoruba, the serpent is the coil between the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. And the serpent has the power to take life, but if you emit the right dosage, it also has medicinal powers too. So it's just like this thing could be both like positive and negative. And like if you're on the negative side, what you think you're doing is positive and vice versa. So there's this like level of like continuous contradiction and things flowing in and out of each other. And people or like things having the ability to be sacred, or the potential to be like dangerous, and all these things kind of like mixing together. But I think a lot of that kind of like energy of like accepting the things that you can't control, that's something that I'm like learning a lot. This like connection to like the outside world and the natural world, and just being around trees, and appreciation for like nature and like water and like the seasons is something that I'm learning from this religion. And there's like this rich like Black mythology of these different deities that I never learned about. I'm like, this is just like on I don't know, just like, I don't want to get like too deep into this, but it's just like, a lot of things like, at least, I don't have access to a lot of like these ancestral things, it's these things that have been erased. So I feel like, this idea of like decolonizing and trying to find things that I have an affinity towards my spirit to give me information as to like who I was outside of colonization, like it is kind of like really important to me.
How did you get? How did you originally get turned on to that?
A couple of ways. I read this book by Robert Ferris Thompson,
Okay.
Flash of the Spirit, and
Gee.
that was incredible. But then Octavia Butler has like these little antidotes of like Yoruba and like and all of her and or in a lot of her novels, like, you know,
Mhm.
is and it comes in like super sly, like in Lilith's Brood, she just like talks about how, you know, the main character, um, you know, how her parents wish that she had married a Yoruba man, or like, you know, in the Parable series, Lauren Olamina, her last name is from a Yoruba word. So it's just like these little antidotes there. And also through like jazz, I feel like a lot of like jazz
Yeah.
musicians, they name their titles after like these super African things. And I'm just like, oh, like, you know, Max Roach has this song Effie. I look up what Effie means, and then it gets me into a whole like wormhole of what that is. So I feel like, I don't know, it's coming from all different angles.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very cool. I love that you're uh, embracing the musical at the same time. You know, like you talked about that in a lot of different ways, and it just came up again with music. And I mean, I'm a huge jazz fan.
Oh
Just
man, we going to talk. Yeah, we
yeah,
yeah,
about jazz. He plays the saxophone.
oh amazing.
But but uh, it I just feel like it's music of the spirit in the deepest
It
possible.
is. It is. That's a direct connection to the divine. That's a direct connection to like being in the moment, being trusting your intuition. But then there's this rigor and this practice that happens to be able to allow yourself that access to be free and with your instrument and with your bandmates and like playing together. I'm just like, I don't know. It is just like fascinating and incredible, and just like the
Yeah.
more and more I'm like diving into it and like learn. I don't know. Like I've been listening to a lot to the Interstellar album by John Coltrane, and it's just like it is a piece of work. It is incredible. Uh,
Incredible.
yeah,
Incredible.
and Cecile Taylor's Jazz Advance is also just
No,
like if I'm in the studio and that's on and I'm making, I am left the building.
yeah, it's so good. Oh, it's great. It's actually great. Well, that whole notion of improvisation,
Mhm.
it's just there.
It is there. It
Just
is embedded
there.
in music.
It's there to feast on and call and response. Like, and I feel like making work physically, especially sculpture, is like you make a move, but all art, you make a
Mhm.
move and then you pay attention, and like really the thing speaks back to you, and when you're in the zone with it, you are taking instruction from the artwork.
Yeah.
I'm always working on 6 or 7 things at the same time. Like I have a bunch of different things going on,
Yeah.
so that I don't get frustrated with anything. I'm like, go away, I'll move on to this other thing. And so, but that is like, speak to me. And it just does. And people, I had a show, I guess a show I had at Jack Shaman a long time ago in 2010. I remember I called it The Sound of It, because it was like when I felt like I was really understanding jazz on another level. But I also meant the sound of it, like I didn't want to identify a thing, but everybody started to say, "Oh, really? Are you one of those people who hears voices?" Everybody was taking it so literally.
But you
But
don't just use your ears to hear
I
stuff.
know exactly, exactly. So I am like 100%. Like that's what I was saying. Like this thing is emitting sound. If you want to call it sound, that to me, it has a voice. And what do we mean by having a voice? It's what do we mean by things speaking to us? It's not just like you and me having this legible conversation. It's like way, 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 way beyond. And like I think that's what those jazz practitioners really understood, how they
Yeah.
were operating in another
On
plane.
another planet, yeah, on another plane. That is definitely evident. That is like they are not on. I can't even just imagine what it is to be in that type of flow with like your bandmates and like all of your collective energy, just creating this vibrational experience. I'm like, that is like completely transcendental. It's like, and there's things that like words and like, you know, things of this realm we can't use to describe it. There's stuff that we feel in our body, but like our body could be floating somewhere in the ether and we feel it somewhere else, you know. So, you know, things don't necessarily, I don't know, like I feel like, you know, sometimes I look at something and I feel it in my toes and I'm just like, oh,
Mhm.
that's but it makes sense, you know. So I don't, yeah, yeah. I think we just got like we're at an hour and 25 minutes. I probably have to
I
put this.
want to ask you about your name because it's such a rock star name. I'm
My
like, oh,
parents, yeah, my parents. This
your
is like my
parents.
birth, yeah, my birth certificate is Woody De Othello. The De is my middle name. And yeah, so it's just like Woody Othello, Woody De Othello, Woody
Well,
Othello.
come on, this is
Yeah,
just.
all of them as their individual. Yeah,
I was like, come, why can't I have a name like that?
you know,
Yeah.
my mom said that she named me Woody because a piece of wood is hard to break by hand.
Oh, oh,
Yeah,
she knew you were special.
yeah, she definitely. I attribute that to like my stubbornness and my hard headedness because like the people around me, I say I'm gonna do stuff and they're just like, dude, you're insane. I'm just like, you just do the thing.
That, I mean, that's amazing. Because did you know anybody who was an artist when you
Not
decided?
growing up, no, not growing up. So it's just always been this effort of just like trying to will the thing. It's like before I even knew what being an artist was, like I always drew, I was always creative, but I didn't think that
Yeah.
you could be an artist. It was just the thing that I was, you know, it's just like, you know, communicating through tactile drawings or like
So good.
performative like movement or whatever it was. So yeah.
Well, your mom, give her my love because
I
that is
was
like so good. She should be naming, everybody. That's just incredible. So what's the Haitian, like DE? What is that?
I don't know what the story behind it is. My dad just wrote that on my birth certificate. It's like Woody of Othello, like
Oh, it's
so
like
represent.
French, sort of
Yeah,
from the, yeah,
yeah. But
that's
yeah, no, Othello, I have no clue. So yeah,
well, it's a pretty epic name.
thank
So
you.
you're spanning like a beautiful tradition of the literary world and the spiritual world, and it's a very creative place to be. It's great. It's
I appreciate your words, Arlene, especially for somebody I've been looking up to. Like I discovered your work in undergrad, and it just like helped me to shape the potential of what ceramic and not even ceramic, with sculpture, what like art, what like just like I'm just like, oh, this is ceramics, but it's not ceramics, it's just sculpture, is art is just something else on its own. So it really like your work really has like given me like the energy to want to like try and cultivate something that, yeah, just like something that feels like free and expansive and like just like, you know, something that feels like void of like other comparisons, something that's like distinctively like just it is what it is. So um yeah.
well, I mean, you're making it worthwhile that I'm doing it. To know that I actually communicated.
Yeah, no, it definitely reached me in southern Florida.
Exactly. I mean, that is a beautiful thing. Southern Florida reached you. I didn't know you, and I'm so thrilled that we got to have this conversation. And I can't wait for your next trip to New York, and we'll go hear some music.
Yeah, that would be, oh yeah, definitely ringing your line. That's gonna be amazing.